Welcome everyone to this session, which is called What Does It Take and What Does It Mean to Be a CMO in Today's World? We have an extremely elite panel of people from the marketing world, from the demand world, from the consumer world, a mix of a lot of industries here in this session today. And let's jump right into it without wasting further time. First and foremost, thank you so much, Eleni, Georgie, and Andrea, for joining this session. My name, by the way, is Asad Raza, and thank you so much for taking out the time and being part of this and giving us an insight into your life and into your experience. So first and foremost, I'd like all of you to maybe introduce yourself for the other panelists and for the people listening to this session. And with that, also tell me, what do you think CMO means? Like, what does CMO mean to you in this current world or in your organization? So ladies first. So let's start with Andrea. So if over to you.
Sure. So hi everyone. I'm Andrea Giangiua. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Fine Hygienic Holdings, so Fine Tissues. I've been in the industry for 18 years now as a marketeer in FMCG, and prior to Fine, I was working in Procter & Gamble. So quite an interesting journey, and I've seen marketing from all sides. And currently, I'm actually running marketing from A to Z, which is a bit different versus in big corporations, where you sometimes don't get to touch the product, or you don't get to touch the advertising, or you don't get to touch the execution. So from that perspective, I touch the whole chain, and I feel I'm the link between obviously the consumer and what the consumer would need, not necessarily want, but need, because they don't know, and what the company can do. And I'm their voice to basically link and make everyone work towards the consumer's needs. Many times, like for example, in a company like ours, you see engineers running the show. And when marketing was put as a key C-suite representative, you could see the conversation switched from engineering conversations to more consumer-centric conversations and business growth, innovation. So I felt that was my impact in the company, and that's my role, to make sure that I bring the consumer to the table and I put a seat at the boardroom, in the boardroom.
Fantastic. And what does CMO mean to you?
I'm gonna say something so tacky, but I like it. It's a chief storyteller. Every time I have to go in a meeting, my CFO says, "Okay, let Andrea tell us the story." So I have to come in and create the story around what we want to do, why we want to do it, how are we going to achieve it. So yes, I'm the chief storyteller.
Perfect. Super. Nice to have you, Andrea. Thank you for joining. Eleni, would you like to take a rap at it?
Hello, everyone. I'm Eleni. I'm a marketeer with international experience across various industries, including IT, FMCG, and also luxury industry. Currently, I'm the demand generation manager at Cmo Middle East and Africa. As Asad said, you want to hear my perspective on a CMO, right? So. Yes. I feel that nowadays companies actually deal with a lot of pressures with digital transformation, with decreasing budgets, with growing customers' expectations. So the role of a marketing of the CMO is actually to take responsibility for how well the company deals with all those pressures. And how he will he will be the link, as Andrea said, the customer, he brings the customer's voice in the company. We are the executives who are doing this job, and they are giving the perspective to the customer.
Super. Very interesting. Thank you, Eleni. Georgie, last but not least.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure being here. My name is Georgie. I I was just telling the panel here, I was almost like born into entertainment. So I came out singing "We Will Rock You," and from then on, of course, went on to Sony Music by default since I came out singing, and co-produced albums. Was the chief marketing head for building a whole bunch of brands there, including A.R. Rahman's Vande Mataram, and launching Savage Garden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in India. Went on to MTV Asia with their regional business, and then on to Astro as chief brand marketing head. And then worked with a boutique consultancy called the Global Brand Forum that actually worked with governments in terms of country branding. Came back to India as CEO of Percept, Sports and Entertainment, and then onward to UBM Informa in a very different industry of exhibitions and conferences, which taught me a lot, and I could also contribute. And finally, as country head for World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, and I was just telling us that I was the smallest guy. So practically my tenure at WWE was walking under people's legs. But here I am. I've survived. And I'm now an entrepreneur, set up GoNuts.com, which we positioned as India's largest and most influential platform for celebrity commerce and human connection. So that's who I am. To answer Asad's question, which is quite poignant, what does CMO stand for? I just gave it some thought, and I thought the chief, I would kind of break that acronym down into Chief Mentoring Officer. And fundamentally, the reason I would say that, if you look at CXOs, today, a marketer is at the heart of the organization. Earlier, it was a cost head. It's even viewed now as a cost, which should change very drastically, simply because if you're the chief mentoring officer, you now need to be almost like a CTO, if not a technology person, to be able to adapt the entire organization in the digital space. You have to be a CXO simply because you're also the chief experience officer for the company, and really taking, as Andrea said, the information from the ground into product development. And last but not the least, you're at the heart of what I call, and I think the chief brand custodian of the brand is the chief marketing officer. And today, when I'm in a startup kind of a culture, people almost tend to forget it's important to raise money, it's important to go out and get customers, but people forget that it's the brand that actually builds value in the end. And it's always about, let me raise a lot of money and then go back and build the brand. I always am of the opinion, and that's the thing we did at GoNuts, is we'll build the brand as we are journeying. And we need to be investing in the brand first, because that's what consumers will relate to, and not as an afterthought. So that's what I think my 2 cents are as far as a CMO is concerned.
Brilliant. Nice to have you on, George.
Thank you.
Nice to have you as part of this panel. And I'll give my introduction as well. My name is Asad Raza. I've been with PNG for the last 15 years. I started my career as in finance and then marketing very quickly, because I realized that was my passion and my forte. Over the last 6-7 years, I've been running a brand called The Art of Shaving globally. It was just a US-centric brand, and now it is in 27 countries all across the world. And that's been our journey. Well, it's been our journey pre-COVID. Post-COVID, we've now changed our channel strategy. But in terms of market expansion, China was the only new market we entered into post the pandemic, which is quite ironic, but it's true. And then on the side, I also have a production house, and we primarily deal with entertainment content for cinemas, television, and theater. And we've been lucky enough to have the best productions on stage and on a television screen and OTT to be produced in the UAE. So we are all about the consumers. And my take on the CMO is, honestly, after all three of you have spoken, there's nothing much else that one can add. But it primarily is the link between the consumer and the brand, and that communication is two-way. So to make sure that the consumer thinks comes inside to the brand and to the company, and they act accordingly, as well as taking the brand image and making sure that the consumers value and see what is the true ethos, the true proposition, and the true direction of the brand. So that's what the CMO is. There was a very interesting point that Joji made of CMOs being a cost in the past and now being at the heart of innovation and driving demand. Let's take it from here. Today, in today's world, what does a CMO mean to a company? How important is that role? And based out of your personal experiences and based out of the current situation that you guys are working in, where do you feel a CMO stands when it comes to driving strategic direction, not only of the brand but of the total company?
Would you like somebody?
Yeah, go for it. No,
no, I was just waiting for your cue. I think in the past, as I said, marketing was always looked at as a cost head. It was all about, if you went through a turbulent time in the company, cut the marketing team, cut the marketing spends, all of that. Today, brand building is important simply because you have to be closer to the customer than ever before. Your ability to turn around your communication is very limited simply because anyone can tweet, anyone can post, anyone can tell and thrash your brand instantaneously in real time. Therefore, somebody who's got his ears to the ground is actually looking at various touch points within the entire organization and is also, as I said, a chief mentoring officer to people in finance, people in technology, at the boardroom, new product innovation. Where do you take the brand into the next phase of growth? What are the various kinds of brand extensions that you want to do? How is this kind of really percolating down to its people within the organization? Is the role of the chief marketing officer. It's no more about the product, it's also about the people. I remember when I was at Astro and we did this massive rebranding exercise for Astro just before we were going IPO. And one of the things I felt is that nobody within the company, and we're talking about 1,000 people there, were really connected to it. For them, it was changing the logo. Whereas internally for us, it was about changing the ethos and the way we looked at it from a brand perspective and the consumers and how consumers perceived us. Therefore, it's really important for us to be also not only communicating outwards, but also communicating inwards, which is also the role of the CMO as they work in conjunctions with their HR departments. To understand the brand tonality, the brand values, how are we living the brand each day is also the role of the CMO.
Absolutely. I could see Andrea in the middle smile and nod. I think it resonated with her. So what do you have to say about that?
No, for sure. I'm just going to build on Joji's point. For sure, there's. I remember a time when marketing was crying that media budgets are cut and everything is given to the trade and so on. But I think when you do the right things, you realize that first of all, marketing has to drive the company vision and culture. Vision, the strategy, the innovation roadmap, those are very important things because obviously it really depends on the size of the company. Now, because I'm in a global headquarter and I actually oversee the whole operation, I realize how important it is for me to have a voice and make sure that innovation is at the forefront of everything we do and everything else drives that innovation, because without innovation, you're obsolete. And in the world today, you see so many players being out-innovated. You see that companies like Tesla, that in effect sell much less than a Toyota, are much higher evaluated because of their potential for future innovation. So I feel that as a marketeer today, if you're able to capture that thirst for innovation, if you're able to be data-driven and show, because you can right now, how anything you do actually ends up linking it to a final purchase, you have an extremely big role to play. It's basically creating the future of the company, if I'm being humble.
That's absolutely great. All of us agree. And you have any thoughts?
Totally agree with that. I totally agree with Andrea. We cannot be any more obsolete. We need to work with rule-breaking mentality, kind of, if I can say, because we need to be creative, think out of the box. Competition is quite high at the moment. With digital being there, we know that we need to focus a lot on building the brand values. Content is super important for the customers. We need to get in the shoes of the customers as marketeers, because a lot of times what we are doing is that we perceive the brand in our own way, and we are not getting in the shoes of the customer. We need to understand, based on data, how they see us and how they see the competitors. So data is another key point that you mentioned, actually, Andrea. This is a very important point for us as marketeers nowadays. We need to analyze data to do a diagnosis and give it back to the company in order to build the brand and make it as we want it to be in the eyes of the customers.
No, absolutely, and I completely agree. When the Art of Shaving was acquired, it was a very luxury 1920s vibe, barber spa kind of concept. And when P&G acquired it, the first thing that was tasked out was to fix the retail distribution, which was done. The second thing was fix the organization and merge it with the systems, which was done. But growth was flat for 3 years. And then they realized that the consumer is saying that I don't want this kind of luxury experience. Yes, there is a niche which would come, 2 customers a day, but to make it more appealing. And that's when, when I joined the brand, the first and foremost task was rebranding it to be a more modern, more relatable, and offering a proposition with innovation, product line, scent line, what the consumer wants. And that's where the Art of Shaving went from, I can't share the numbers, but from an X business to a 12X business over the next 4 years. So so that is key. And also today, I feel, this applies a lot to the startup world, is there is a lot of clutter. There is a lot of, there might be one specific need of a consumer, and 6, 7, companies or products would be there to satisfy that need in one way or the other. Product quality, proposition, all of those things could vary, but they would have that claim. So at the core, a marketeer holding true and making that brand is one, and then reaching those consumers and forming that relationship with them today, especially in the startup world, is critical. There are so many good ideas on the VC network that we see that keep coming up. And then we're like, why haven't we heard of this before? Why do you only have 400 customers a month? Why do you, your idea could be the next big thing. And then you realize that the fundamental problem was creating that brand story and taking it to consumers, breaking the clutter, and being visible is critical. And that's, in my humble point of view, that's why a CMO is so important, is that you break the clutter, you drive strategic direction, and you give not only your product a life cycle, but you're actually even giving your company a life cycle of how it evolves from step A to step B and appeals to more consumers and to more customers. And then building on this, and I promise this is the last question on CMOs before we get into the marketing side of it, and I can pick your brains and your experience on that. If you were to identify any 2, 3, good CMOs or marketeers in your life, whether they were your mentors, your mentees, people you've hired, people who you aspire to be like, what would be the top 2 traits that you think a CMO should have, or what they had, what inspired you in your journey? And this time we'll start with Eleni.
Oh, okay. Then I would definitely say the first one is empathy. So he needs to be able to understand the customers, as we discussed, be customer centric and customer champion, to give the direction, the lead with the strategy that he is creating or she is creating, and also agility. Agility is another key trait that I think every one of us should have nowadays. Technology is is changing all the time. Marketing trends are changing. We need to be up to speed. We need to be able to create strategies that they are actually relevant to what the customer's expectations are. So I believe that these are the two key traits that I would seek for Cmo.
Very good. Empathy, yes, empathy is, I think empathy should be across the board. It should be for every single person, whether CXO or just middle management, or everyone should have empathy. Andrea.
Yes, sir. So, in my view, of course, on top of what Eleni said, because I think those definitely are part of the traits, I would also say CMO has to be a lifelong student. And obviously lead by example this, because many times I feel, first of all, the reason why lifelong student, I think it's very simple. Things are changing so fast. There are so many technologies. On one side, you need to stay up to date. On the other side, you need to break through the clutter and say, yes, there are principles that stay, that are timeless, and there are new things that we can learn. And there has to be someone that makes those decisions. You can't just run after everything, but you have to know everything to be able to decide what works for your company and what doesn't. And then you have to instill that same drive into your team, because in the end, they're the ones that have to execute and be humble, listen, because you need to stay ahead. I meet so many times interns that directly say, I know how to do this, I've done that. And I'm like, wow, okay. But by the time I hired you, what you know doesn't stand anymore. So that's one of the things I've really pushed, and I even I always set up a marketing academy everywhere I go, because even if you know, I'm sure you can learn more.
Absolutely.
True, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joji.
Well, I think for starters, a CMO needs to be somebody who's a great observer of people. Because if you have to be a storyteller, the story starts with you first, right? And I think we do, CMOs or marketeers in general, rely a lot, and especially if you come from a P&G, Unilever kind of a background, you all would know the number of focus groups and the number of research one does before any kind of product development or marketing campaign. But if you go back intuitively at anything, you would know that if you could answer those questions, you're just validating it with research. So one is the observation, the ability to observe. I completely agree with Andreas in terms of the fact that you have to be an eternal learner. But I think the third thing, which I think is essential from a marketeer's perspective, is his or her ability to be a dreamer. Because we are storytellers at the end. We are storytellers. End of the day, if we are creating a product line, that product line is not force-fitting into a consumer's life. It is actually giving him a reason to buy. So you are kind of you may be translating a pain point through your communication, but the fact is, unless you've not created the need for it through observing people and also trying to see, I mean, let me just give you a case in point. When we started gonuts.com, and this is not a plug, the functionality of the product is very clear. It's about celebrity video messages. And a lot of the competitors who jumped on the bandwagon after we started did exactly that. I was very clear that we are not about celebrity video messages. We're about human connection. And that completely changed the aura of the product. When you are sending a video message to your loved one, and a celebrity is calling out his or her name, singing a song that they like, and giving them the message, it's a wow experience that they'll never forget. And it builds that connection. What you couldn't express, you said it through your avatar, who's the celebrity. Now, it's just a small instance, but I think if you apply the same thought across, when we did Astro as the, branded Astro, one was the earlier branding was direct to you. I mean, how functional and how stupid is that kind of positioning? You're talking about a satellite connection and sending satellite content into a set-top box, and that was what you were telling to the customer. Where was the connection? But when you said making your life richer through the plethora of content that's there, it just changed the aura of the product, and it suddenly made people believe the need to have it. I think that's what it is. So being a storyteller, being a dreamer, and being an observer of people.
Brilliant. And just to add one point, because I don't think there's anything else left from my side to add, but one thing which I think I've learned across running this global business is cultural sensitivity and flexibility is something which is key for a global CMO. Sometimes we sort of get tied up in our box and we don't want to move. A lot of companies have gone to that global one copy, send it to every region, just translate it and it'll work, which doesn't work, by the way. But I think cultural sensitivity, like for a market like Middle East, I remember we did a Braun initiative where Beyonce and JLO were our brand ambassadors. This was like in 2014. And we could not use that same message track when we brought that product into this region. So I think, and the same with shaving products, right? Here, again, beards are not only culturally but also religiously sensitive topics for a lot of people, and they go for the nice trim and cut, but you can't ask them to shave it all off, right? You have to be very sensitive to what the cultural requirements are, the way your message goes out, how much you listen to respect. So I think from a global CMO standpoint, that cultural flexibility, adaptability, and sensibility would be something which I would definitely add to that. And on that point, all of us have worked in some ways on international businesses as well, and have had some exposure or major exposure in case of the two lovely women on this chat here in the Middle East. So if I was to ask you that in terms of whether consumer dynamics or PR, communications, a lot of people in the Middle East right now are on digital. I read that 96% of people between 16 and 60 in Saudi either use Facebook, Snapchat, or Instagram at least once every hour. So that is social media frenzy in this region, and the accessibility is there. So if you were to point out maybe your top difference of what makes Middle East unique, special, and different from the world when it comes to you thinking about as a marketeer taking your product to them, or telling a story, or listening to their feedback and replying to that, what would that be? And again, any one of you can start. I won't put you in the spot and call out your name.
I can start.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. To be fair, I've worked now 8 years in the region, and I worked on everything from, I worked on interesting categories, on detergent in Egypt. I worked on feminine care in Saudi, and on a lot of toilet paper across the region. So I had different experiences. Each product, of course, had its own taboo, especially feminine hygiene and toilet paper. So I've learned, of course, the cultural sensitivities, and I've learned to respect them and how to approach my consumers when talking these topics. I do agree that we need to cater to their habits, to their culture, because they're very proud of it, and it's a lovely culture, and we should definitely encourage it and bring it to the surface, and we've done that, and it works very well. While in some cases, for example, with mothers, you realize that deep down, while the language, the culture, the habits, the events are different, what a mother feels is more or less the same around the world. And they all want their children to be safe. They all want them to develop into happy human beings. So there is, on one side, yes, there are universal truths that all parents feel, and then there is an element of tailoring, which you should do. And then there is an element of sensitivity because you don't want your brand to be boycotted and killed. So definitely, I had to learn all of this. It was really interesting, and finding the right communication channels. For example, with girls, I'm not going to talk on TV when their brother sits next to them about periods. I'm going to talk to them privately. About toilet paper, we never show someone in a toilet. We have a little cartoon which is called Rolly, and it's really cute and funny, and nothing strange about Rolly. So we had to tailor, so we bring it in an acceptable way to the consumers. But at the core of the human being, we all have the same needs and the same fears. So there are things that we can reapply.
That's very interesting. And just to add on that, sorry, I'm jumping in and giving my 2 cents because it instigated a very interesting example that we went through. So Art of Shaving was a very experiential brand, and that experiential brand was built around the spas, which was the core at the distribution and the customer interaction. Throughout the world, we competed on how we looked, what kind of service we gave, and our pricing. And that would attract customers to come in. And once they would come in, use the product would start flying. The product was 90% of our business. Services was just an experiential 10% of what we did. When we came into this region was not on our first 5, as we call them, the first 5 launch ramp. But I think people now not, but maybe in 2015, sort of undervalued or did not give the right respect to the size of the prize in the Middle East. Today, it was not in our top 5 for launch. Today, out of the international business, Middle East is the #1 business that we have. So it is a phenomenal place where consumers are good spenders and love spending on themselves. The second thing was here, barbers were traditional, were timeless. Going to another barber is as bad as cheating on your partner. And it would come down by tradition and by generation. My father went to X barber. I will go to him when he can't cut my hair. I will go to his son, and that continues. And getting somebody who's already going to a barber to come to you, I'm telling you, when we did focus groups, the analogy sits. They felt that they were cheating on their barbers going to another barber, even if it was for a free shave or a free haircut. So we were like, okay, what do we do about this? We realized that for us, the objective was get the product to them, right? The product is the main. So we created these small pouches because all of them would take their own pouch to the barber, and we branded it father, son, and we sold them as sets of 2. And we would put our products inside them, and the overall campaign was your barber, our product, your relationship, our love. And it flew like in Saudi. We didn't need stores because we just had the product being picked up to be taken to their barbers to get that experience. So that sort of gives you an idea of what even Andrea said, that if you are in touch with cultural sensitivities, what can be done, what can't be done, and understand how people, the universal truths, the universal emotions are the same, the mother-daughter relationship, the father-son relationship, and how you can build your story around that is what the region is all about. And it's a beautiful region when it comes to customers, consumers, and how much they can spend and how much they enjoy spending on themselves.
Exactly.
It's brilliant. Like, yeah, you can go to Moscow and have a $10 Starbucks, and you can come here and have an $8 Starbucks, but I'm sure the person drinking it over here will be much more happy than the guy paying $10 on maybe Moscow high end and yeah, so the consumer is a generally happy consumer. Eleni, Jyoti, do you have any thoughts on this, or we can move to the last segment of our conversation?
No, Eleni, go ahead.
You covered me completely. I feel that what both you and Andrea mentioned is exactly what I wanted also to mention about Middle East is a unique market, a beautiful market, and yeah, my experience is exactly the same like yours.
Yes, and Eleni is one of the happy spenders. Eleni gets really, really happy when she spends. So I think that the
I
last
think
thing
most of women are sad. Marketeers also. Andrea, please.
I did not say that.
It's crazy. I'm a sucker for all shop ads on Instagram, and I know they are targeting me and following me everywhere. I looked at one piece of jewelry, and I have 10 shops following me.
The interesting part is that for our business, 25% of our sales is done by women. It's a male-centric brand. We don't have a single product for women, but for gifting and for replenishment,
Exactly.
it's hard to separate the two because we don't. But 25% of our revenue is bought by women. So they are and in PNG, Andrea knows this as well. In PNG, it was all about the female shopper. She's the one who makes the decision in the house for everything. So ignore everyone else, focus on the female. She's the boss, and I completely, as I've grown older, I completely agree with it. Females are the boss.
And Josie, I feel this is universal, right? This is universal. It's not only Middle Eastern one.
It's universal.
I mean, I was very recently, I was reading an article. I don't know what, was it a McKinsey article? I'm not too sure, but it was something about to the effect that any decision making for a company needs to have a woman in that on that decision. Make sure that it's right. I agree with that. Even in the house.
In the house, there is only one decision maker.
Absolutely.
We don't have a say. We might say it's like we say yes, ma'am. How soon, ma'am? That's it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Some people learn it the hard way. Some people learn it better.
Yeah, some people learn it the hard way. Some people learn it. So I think the last thing that I'd like to touch upon is that the world has gone through such a big change, right? COVID has sort of rebranded everything, has reshaped the way we do things. Entertainment, for example, it was a very cinema, you go out, you get live entertainment, or you go to the cinema. Now it's all OTT. And that has not only changed the way people consume entertainment, but has changed the kind of content that they consume, has broken this whole superstardom that was created around some, brand personas, and has changed the name of the game. And that's happened to all of us in all aspects of life and in all, let's say, product and services across the world. What do you feel is the biggest change that has happened, and how have you, as a marketeer leading your organization, leading your team, how have you adapted in that journey pre-COVID and post-COVID, and with this explosion of digital and social? Again, Andrea, I'd love to start with you.
I wanted to not jump in like last time. All right. In FMCG, we've seen quite interesting changes. I'm going to touch on a couple. One of them was the fact that there was an increase in number of brands in the consideration set of consumers. If you remember, during lockdown and during the first 6 months, a lot of companies had issues with supply. The supply chain was an issue. You wouldn't find your product, and so on and so forth. You would buy anything. So people were shaken and actually tried different things. So they moved from usually buying their brand that they're used to being flexible if we find 2-3 brands that are available and on promotion. So that was actually very interesting for us to see, because in that context, a lot of loyal consumers moved elsewhere, and we needed to regain them. And if you didn't manage your supply chain very well, you would have lost significantly. I can tell you that we had huge problems with obviously our factory. We have a factory here in Abu Dhabi. The border was closed. Getting our workers there was a big issue. We had to get exceptions from the government to actually have the factory running. When the border closed, the employees were there. They had to sleep in the factory. We had to find how to help them and set it up. So that's a big shift, and we had to work even harder to bring new consumers and to keep the ones that we had. Thankfully, it worked well, and thankfully we had a good supply because we didn't suffer too much. But I've seen a lot of brands that did. And the second thing I'm going to talk about is bulk buys online because my products are bulky. People finally realized that they don't have to carry all that heavy things from the supermarket home, from the car in the house, and so on. You can order them online, and they all come nicely packed to your house. And the shift was huge, and it continued. I don't think it will ever go back. At least in the markets where the online servicing is very, very good, and the shipment is free. So you felt that the adoption was amazing, and things, for example, I've been talking about buying bulk online subscription models for a few years now, but it never caught on. And now the need made it happen. So interesting how we accelerated things.
Yeah, thank you for that aspect. Joji, switching gears, could you tell us how the entertainment industry and how maybe Gonuts is now meeting that need, how the entertainment industry changed in COVID with all that digital consumption, and those global brands no longer, they're strong brands, but that superstardom, that halo effect sort of started getting a little shaky. What were the changes which happened in terms of marketing in an entertainment industry, and how have you adapted to that post-COVID?
That's a very interesting question, Asad. So interestingly, when we set up our company and I launched my entrepreneurial venture, we went head on into COVID. We started in March, and as you know, April was when everything hit the roof, right? One of the observations, so we initially, when we built this model, the whole model was to provide celebrities an opportunity. I mean, the key pain points we were trying to was accessibility and transparency. Mm-hmm. The fact that now you have an ability to access your favorite celebrity and get something within 48 hours, which is personalized. And second is, from a B2B side of the business, the opportunity to now access your celebrity online without having to go through layers of middlemen who claim to be representing the artist. But interestingly, after, as we got into COVID, one of the big realizations that came to me was we are extremely connected in a disconnected world. So we are online the whole time, we are on the phones the whole time, but we will not speak to each other. We will not communicate to each other. We will not express, we will not touch. And COVID just exacerbated that, where you couldn't touch, you couldn't meet, you couldn't be in a group, you couldn't communicate. Everything was, as we're doing now, virtual. So in a virtual bubble that you have, how do you stay connected? How do you create empathy? How do you create compassion? Today, for example, if you even look at the trend that is there online, people want authenticity. People want empathy. People want compassion because they've gone to a near-death experience and come back. Or they've known of somebody who went into a near-death experience and come back. We all have someone in our inner circle or 3 points of contact that has had COVID, right? And it suddenly has made us feel more real, where earlier it was about getting your mom's update on your Facebook and then wishing her. Now it's you try and make it a point to make sure you call her every 2 days. That's the difference. You know what I mean? So when you look at that from a consumer behavior point of view, and where you had a historic, should I say, build up where people have had difficulty in expression, our product stood brilliantly there to be able to be that via media to communicate. And what better way than a celebrity to get you that wow experience? That's what it was. But as we are now going, through the various iterations of the product and how we're going to kind of, one of the very interesting things that came about is how organizations started using us. So earlier, if you see an HR department, it was all about, your evaluations at the end of the year, or you're hiring or you're firing, either of the three things, right? Now it's about retention, as Andrea said. It is about communicating. We are in it together, that we are family, that we all have to go towards common purpose. So this whole aspect of common purpose, authenticity, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs has moved away from a base consumption to a more aspirational consumption. And products and services have to now adopt to this new norm of being able to communicate that, because even consumers are saying, look, I've had it with that buy now, pay later kind of stuff. Yes, it may exist. Now it's what's it going to do for me and do for my family.
Bravo.
And that's the change that is slowly evolving, which is here to stay. And I hope to God it doesn't go away, because we will have better products, we will have better marketeers, and we will have a better ecosystem.
No, absolutely. And it's a very common belief, and it's very cliched, and everybody talks about it, that post-COVID, everything went digital. One of the things that we noticed, especially when we were going into China, is that there is a huge, as I said, clutter on digital. And this buy now, pay later, sponsored advertisements, push notifications, people are done. They are like, we don't want, and companies spent a lot of money doing that. They would add 50,000 USD to 75,000 USD per country, per channel. So per Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they would have that budget just to push their advertisement, push their communication, so that people would see it. And now this concept is done and dusted. Organic trends are more. That's why marketeers, as we said, are coming up with creative stories and creative ways to get on that bandwagon of creating that buzz, creating that hype organically, whether it's via entertainment, via comedy, via a music clip, via a filter, whatever it may be, right? That's the ethos of it. And the second thing, and what we did in China, which was very interesting, is people look at products and ask themselves, what is it going to do for me and my family beyond the benefit of what you are offering? Fine, you'll shave me, you'll give me skincare, but from a personal well-being and from a family well-being, what does it do? And we had an option of spending bucket loads of money doing advertisements, sponsored advertisements, live streams to push the product, or we could find a community of people, because they had just gone through COVID, ask them to share their journey of what it did for them in terms of mental health, in terms of their relationships, and then how they are transforming themselves, not necessarily linked to our product.
That's right.
How they are transforming themselves and how they are feeling good in the future. And then obviously one of the aspects is, if you look good, you feel good. That's psychological in today's day and age.
Great position.
You link with that, and that's how the art of shaving became viral. And to be very honest, for people, for finance people who are watching this, the budgets really were less than 35% of what it would have been in those push notifications. But yes,
I would just like to add, one of the things that has been a huge realization as an entrepreneur is the only people who make money through all entrepreneurs and business is only Facebook and Google.
True, LinkedIn.
And laughing at us and saying, keep spending, because I'm the one earning. You guys can go fancy around with, I control the algorithms and I'll tell you who they'll reach at the end of it. But we need to have stories that connect, as you rightly said. This is not about the functionality of shaving. It's about the transformation of the individual. And that's the whole thing. The heart of the product has to be developed and addressed in this new era post-COVID.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thank you very much for this engaging conversation. It was a lot of fun. I got to learn a lot. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers as well learned a lot from the three of you by the breadth of experience that you brought in about what CMOs are, about what traits they have, the Middle East, the overall change in the marketing sphere and spectrum, and how to connect more with the consumer and show empathy and show an inward out and an outward in mode of communication. So thank you very much, Eleni, Andrea, and Georgie, for the session. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and hope you have a good rest of the conference as well.
Bye.
Thank you.